There's a pattern in history that keeps repeating. Greed meets opportunity, opportunity meets weak oversight, and suddenly someone has stolen billions while the system designed to protect people does nothing. Every major financial scam follows the same basic sequence. Someone builds trust, layers complexity on top of that trust, exploits it, and then the whole thing collapses. And the victims are always the same, ordinary people who believe the system was designed to protect them. It wasn't. Let me show you how this pattern has played out through the biggest frauds in modern history and what they reveal about how greed corrupts the systems we depend on. Bernard Madoff was Wall Street's golden boy, former NASDAQ chairman, perfectly positioned at the top of the financial system. That's exactly why his Ponzi scheme was so lethal. He understood that trust plus exclusivity becomes a shield against skepticism. Madoff cultivated the wealthiest, most sophisticated investors. You had to be invited to invest with him. That exclusivity, that sense you were part of an elite circle with access to extraordinary returns, was the trap. Madoff promised consistent double-digit returns even during market crashes. But there were no actual investments, no trading, no portfolios. He just took money from new investors and paid supposed returns to old investors using their own money. The fake statements showed mathematically impossible profits, but nobody questioned it because Madoff's reputation made questioning seem foolish. From the early 1980s until 2008, Madoff ran history's largest Ponzi scheme. $65 billion gone. It collapsed not because regulators caught him, but because the 2008 crisis forced investors to actually withdraw their money. Madoff had no funds. By December 2008, he admitted to his sons his entire fund was just a lie. Thousands of victims lost everything. Pensions disappeared. Charities were wiped out. Retirees lost their entire savings. Madoff went to prison for 150 years and died there in 2021. Enron was different. Madoff hid behind reputation. Enron corrupted the entire corporate system. By 2001, Enron was the 7th largest publicly traded corporation in America, named Fortune magazine's most innovative company 6 years running. But everything was fraud. Executives led by Kenneth Lay and Jeffrey Skilling were determined to boost the stock price by any means. They used mark-to-market accounting, allowing them to list projected profits instead of actual profits. They created special purpose entities to hide billions in debt. They misclassified loans as sales. They used energy trading strategies with names like Death Star to manipulate electricity prices. By the time Enron collapsed in 2001, it had hidden over $60 billion in failed investments. 25,000 employees lost jobs. $2 billion in pension savings evaporated. Skilling served 12 years in prison. Smike Fatmaus died before sentencing. But the damage spread. Enron's accounting firm, Arthur Andersen, one of the Big Five, was so implicated it was destroyed. 28,000 people lost jobs when Arthur Andersen collapsed. Congress passed Sarbanes-Oxley to prevent similar frauds. But regulations couldn't stop what came next. The 2008 financial crisis wasn't one fraud. It was systemic fraud. An entire industry, from mortgage brokers to investment banks to rating agencies, all participated in the same schemes simultaneously. The mechanism was mortgage-backed securities. Banks gave mortgages to people who couldn't afford them. Adjustable rate mortgages with teaser rates, stated income loans where borrowers claimed incomes they didn't have. Lenders didn't care because they could immediately sell the mortgages to investment banks, who packaged them into securities and sold them worldwide. The incentive system created moral hazard on a catastrophic scale. Nobody cared if loans were garbage because nobody would hold them. By 2006, financial institutions handed out $600 billion in subprime mortgages annually, almost 1 in 4. Housing prices were insane. People bought homes they couldn't afford. Banks lent money they knew wouldn't be repaid. Everyone in the chain made money hand over fist. Until 2007, when housing prices stopped rising, when adjustable rate mortgages reset higher, when people defaulted. By 2008, the financial system was collapsing. Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. Bear Stearns was sold for nothing. Trillions in mortgage-backed securities became worthless. The government injected over $700 billion through TARP. Millions lost homes. Unemployment spiked to 10%. Almost nobody went to prison. Bankers received bonuses while ordinary Americans lost everything. Here's what these frauds reveal about greed and financial systems. First, reputation is the ultimate currency. Madoff succeeded because his reputation was impeccable, backed by decades of status and NASDAQ position. Enron had an impeccable reputation, named most innovative company 6 years running. Banks in 2008 had impeccable reputations and government backing. When reputation becomes your shield, nobody questions you hard enough. Second, complexity is cover. When something requires PhDs in finance to understand, ordinary people can't hold anyone accountable because they literally don't understand what's happening. Special purpose entities, credit default swaps, mark-to-market accounting, mortgage-backed tranches. Most people can't pass it. That's intentional. Third, incentive structures matter more than regulations. If you pay people bonuses for closing deals today without caring about consequences tomorrow, they will commit fraud. If you let lenders sell mortgages immediately instead of holding them, they will make bad mortgages because the risk is someone else's problem. Regulations mean nothing if the incentives reward fraud. You can pass all the laws you want, but if the money flows to the criminals will prosper. Fourth, this all happens in plain sight. Madoff was openly managing billions while the SEC looked away. Enron's tricks were visible in their filings for anyone sophisticated enough to read them. Wall Street was openly securitizing garbage mortgages and selling them to pension funds. The fraud wasn't hidden. It was just so massive, so embedded in the system that it felt normal. If this opened your eyes to how financial fraud actually works, how greed corrupts systems and destroys lives, subscribe because we're going to track the next fraud as it's happening right now. The patterns are already visible. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes.